Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm John Tucker. Here are the stories we're following today.
John, let's begin with the presidential race and a remarkable week for Vice President Kamala Harris. Since she announced her presidential campaign last Sunday, Harris has raised $200 million, and her favorability rating has jumped from 35% to 43% in an ABC News poll. Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois says it's a whole new campaign.
The electorate is energized. Democrats are ready to go. You've seen hundreds of thousands of people signing up to volunteer. Plus, our candidate is the Energizer Bunny. She's been everywhere all the time over the last several days, and we're excited about that.
But Republican Governor Chris Sununu of New Hampshire says this is just a honeymoon period for Harris.
The first poll, I believe, that will actually matter, if I may, is the Wednesday after Labor Day, right? So you're going to have this 30-day honeymoon period. Things will settle. Folks will get back, talk to their family and friends, come off a summer vacation, put their kids in school, all of that sort of stuff. And then they'll start really thinking about what this race really means.
Both Governors Chris Sununu and J.B. Pritzker were guests on ABC's This Week, heard every Sunday on Bloomberg Radio.
And we now turn to a controversial election in Venezuela. The country's political opposition rejecting the electoral authorities' ruling that Nicolas Maduro was reelected as the president on Sunday. The U.S. and some Latin American neighbors also raising concerns about the official result. Bloomberg News Latin American executive editor Creighton Harrison says confirmation of the vote tally is now key.
The latest report we got from the opposition was that they'd gotten about 30% of the tabulated votes they're supposed to have access to verify the count. Whether the international community can do any better has yet to be seen. There are some election observers, some of the ones that we all know, like the Carter Center, are here in Venezuela. We'll hear from the Carter Center supposedly on Tuesday with their report on this election, so we may get some interesting details there. But yes, the U.S. Isn't the only one. The president of Chile just came out and said that he will not recognize the results until he sees some verifiable results.
Bloomberg News Latin American executive editor Creighton Harrison reports the Electoral Center declared Maduro the winner with 51.2% of the vote, compared with 44.2% for rival Edmundo Gonzalez. But an exit poll conducted by the U.S. firm Edison Research had Gonzalez winning by more than 30 percentage points. That's adding to suspicions that Maduro's administration tampered with the tally.
And, John, tensions are escalating in the Middle East as well. Overnight, Israel attacked Hezbollah targets, and it's threatening further retaliation for a rocket strike that killed 12 children and teenagers in the Golan Heights. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is just back from a visit to the U.S., and he has held back-to-back consultations with military chiefs and his security cabinet. We get more from Bloomberg Israel Bureau Chief Ethan Brunner.
The overwhelming nature of the commentary in Israel is let's do it smart and carefully, and let's not start another war. But, you can't always determine whether a war results from what you do. So they're trying to figure it out. I mean, the likeliest, it seems to me, is either going after Hezbollah leaders or going after Hezbollah military targets. I don't think they're going to go after Lebanese infrastructure, but that is a possibility.
Bloomberg's Israel Bureau Chief Ethan Brunner reports Hezbollah has said its attacks on Israel will cease when the fighting in Gaza does.
And turning to the markets now, Nathan, a big week for central banks. Investors going to be watching monetary policy decisions in Japan, the UK, and of course here in the U.S., where the Fed begins its two-day policy meeting tomorrow. Conference Board Chief Economist Dana Peterson says the Fed will proceed cautiously despite calls for the central bank to cut this month.
I don't think there's a ton of urgency. Yes, the bias is towards cutting, but they're also looking at everything. If you want to define a soft landing as getting inflation back towards target, not creating a recession, and also making sure you don't have massive layoffs, it's happening. But certainly you still have these areas of the economy that are putting upward pressure on inflation. But I think the Fed does not want to make a mistake. They want to feel confident that all the stars are aligning.
Dana Peterson with the Conference Board says mortgage rates will drop once the Fed starts cutting, generating another cycle of demand that could potentially fuel shelter cost inflation.
And, John, it's also a busy week for earnings, including several big tech names. We get a preview from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
4 of the so-called Magnificent Seven will report this week, specifically Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and Apple. Sam Stovall is Chief Investment Strategist at CFRA.
Our feeling is that, while there could be some stumbling, we are maintaining our overweight recommendation on tech, mainly because companies will soon be looking at 2026 estimates and pretty much ignoring what they're hearing right now in 2024.
Other high-profile tech names this week include Intel, Qualcomm, and ARM Holdings. Among consumer names, we hear from McDonald's, Wendy's, and Starbucks. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks, Charlie. And in Europe, Heineken investors may be crying in their beer this morning. Shares are down 7%. The Dutch brewer took a nearly $950 million charge for the decline in valuation of its stake in China's largest brewer. Heineken is also flagging weakness in the U.S. that's clouding its prospects.
And John, the outlook for artificial intelligence is getting longer at Apple. The iPhone maker is delaying the release of its latest AI features. More on that from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
The arrival will happen in October, roughly a month later than anticipated, and the delay will give Apple more time to fix bugs. We are told the rollout of Apple Intelligence will be a part of software updates, originally scheduled for September. Now, in spite of the delayed release, Apple Intelligence will be available to software developers for the first time for early testing as soon as this week. That strategy is atypical, but the stakes are higher than usual. Apple needs support from developers to ensure a smooth consumer release of its big bet on AI. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, thanks, Doug. Bitcoin up more than 2%, hovering just under $70,000. Over the weekend, Donald Trump said he'll expand a pro-crypto agenda if he returns to the White House.
This afternoon, I'm laying out my plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world, and we'll get it done.
Former President Trump making the comments at the Bitcoin 2024 conference in Nashville, Tennessee. And that brings us to 5:08 on Wall Street. Let's go to look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, John. In cities nationwide over the weekend, vigils were held and demonstrations for Sonia Massey. She was shot and killed in her Illinois home by a sheriff's deputy earlier this month. Anti-racist protesters called for systemic changes to policing in the U.S. This demonstrator spoke in New York City.
Sonia Massey was murdered by the people who are supposed to protect and care for her.
Protesters called for a number of murder convictions for former Deputy Sean Grayson. Police in Rochester, New York are investigating a shooting at a local park that left one person dead and 6 injured, one critically. Rochester Police Lieutenant Greg Bello.
At a Sunday afternoon where everybody's out barbecuing, having a good time, decided to pull out a gun for whatever reason, whether it's a dispute going on for, short-term, long-term, whatever it was, somebody that pulled out a gun. Obviously, that's incredibly unacceptable.
Lieutenant Bello says no suspects are in custody at this time. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, appearing with military veterans in New York City, says the GOP policy agenda dubbed Project 2025 would be disastrous for the Veterans Administration. Schumer says it creates chaos for veterans, especially those receiving health benefits. Schumer says deep inside the plan are legislative attempts to slash veterans' benefits.
It's 900 pages of cuts, but it's hidden away in this page 600 and something are all the plans to hurt our veterans. They don't want to brag about it.
Schumer pledging to protect vet benefits under his continued leadership, including the Bipartisan PACT Act, which improves care for veterans exposed to toxins like burn pits and Agent Orange. The explosive park fire in Northern California has grown into the biggest fire in the state this year, burning up to 5,000 acres per hour. Thousands of residents have been evacuated. This woman and her husband took shelter in their vehicle with their 7 dogs.
Whatever we had can be replaced, but I wouldn't have left the animals at all.
The man allegedly responsible heads to court today. Fiber optics networks in 6 French departments were sabotaged overnight, but Paris was not impacted as the Olympic Games continue. France's transport minister says all trains are running on France's high-speed train lines that were disrupted by sabotage last week. Global news, 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, John.
All right, Michael, thank you. And that brings us to 5:11 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. And for that, here's John Stashauer.
All right, John, the narrative after the Mets Subway Series sweep was the Mets were hot, the Yankees were not. The script was flipped over the weekend. 2 lopsided loss for the Mets. The Yankees won twice in Boston. A quick start. Gleyber Torres, 2-run single and a 3-run first inning. The Yanks pulled away, scoring 4 times over their last 3 at-bats. They beat the Red Sox 8-2. They scored 26 runs in the series. And last night they got solid pitching from Carlos Rodon. He's had now back-to-back strong outings after 5 losses in a row. The game was the debut for the newest Yankee, Jazz Chisholm.
Every kid dreams of being a Yankee. You know, it's the most famous team in baseball that Derek Jeter played on, you know what I mean? So everybody's favorite player was Derek Jeter growing up. I had him as an owner, so I just feel like it was only right to come on and put on the uniform.
Yanks acquired Chisholm from Miami. Expect more trades before tomorrow's deadline. As for the Mets, until the Pete Alonso home run, 8th inning at Citi Field, they had been outscored by Atlanta over the weekend, 13-0. The Braves had 4 home runs. They won 9-2. Tennis in the spotlight today at the Paris Olympics at Roland Garros. It's Rafael Nadal versus Novak Djokovic in the second round. They usually meet in a Grand Slam final. It's the 60th time they have faced off, with Djokovic ahead 30-29. It might be the last match of Nadal's career, though he hasn't said that officially. Andy Murray has. He's hanging it up after the Olympics and playing doubles with England's Dan Evans. They advanced after facing 5 match points. Did any U.S. Olympian Sunday have a better day than Kevin Durant? Didn't play any of the 5 exhibition games due to a calf injury. KD scored 21 first-half points, only missed 1 shot. The U.S. opened up 110-84 over Serbia. The next game is Wednesday against South Sudan, who nearly beat the U.S. in a tune-up. The U.S. women have their opening game today against Japan. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. John and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Vice President Kamala Harris heads into the second week of her presidential campaign, enjoying a huge surge in fundraising and at the polls. She has raised $200 million already since declaring her campaign just over a week ago, and her favorability has jumped 8 points in an ABC News poll. For more, we're joined by Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries. Bill, good morning. It does seem as though the wind is at Vice President Harris's back right now, and I guess the next big step is picking a running mate.
That's right. She's had kind of an ideal first week as the new presidential candidate. And, you talked about the fundraising. You talked about the visibility she's gotten and how that's played out in terms of her favorability. She is now, I think, increasingly focused on who her running mate will be. And the idea she has, I think, is to try to make this pick before that virtual August 7th roll call of delegates. So she has basically a little over a week to go before she settles on who she wants to be running alongside her.
And in the meantime, as we've been watching the campaign roll on, it seems as though former President Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, have had a bit of stumbles. Vance with these past comments about childless cat ladies, that sort of thing. And I guess Harris has been testing out this new line that the Trump-Vance message is just plain weird. I mean, where do you see the trajectory going now?
Well, if you remember, the Trump campaign was really on quite a roll ahead of Biden's withdrawal. They were starting to bring in a lot more money. There was a rally around Trump after that assassination attempt, and really even after that, Biden had that debate performance. So they were on the ups then, and the momentum has swung in the other direction. I expect we'll see a lot more ups and downs for both campaigns in the final, basically, 100 days before the election. But yeah, with the change in the Democratic side, the Republicans have to, switch up their strategy. They're trying to figure out what works with their core and what helps them draw in new people. And they've been under some extra scrutiny now. And so, you hear this message coming from the Democratic side that they find the Trump-Vance ticket to be weird and saying some odd things. Listen, I think both sides are going to take a beating and have their high moments as we kind of grind ahead to November.
So I guess the challenge then for the Harris campaign is to avoid any low moments, any stumbles, as she really has not much time to choose a running mate here.
Yeah, so she's got about 7-8 days ahead of that roll call vote of the Democratic delegates. And then I think the next thing after that is she has committed to doing that early September, I think September 10th, debate that had been scheduled between Trump and Biden. The Trump campaign saying that they want to, they're not going to confirm anything until they know that she is the candidate. But that would be kind of a next key moment when those two, Harris and Trump, have to be on a stage together debating just less than 2 months before the election.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm John Tucker. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.